All right, Jason, when you look at Clemson and, again, those units that aren't quite as great as some of the other units, look at Georgia. Where's your concern?
We got to start up front with that offensive line, obviously. Vastly underperformed last year. I've said it over and over. And now you're having to replace your left tackle, Jordan McFadden. Sorry, I'm starting to lose my voice. Jordan McFadden's moving over from the right side to the left side, and he's a little shorter than your normal left tackles are, but he's got the length to make up for it. And I'm not concerned about him. I think he's going to be very good in that role. But then at left guard and center is where some of the questions come in. They got Matt Bockhorst at left guard, but you got to replace Cade Stewart at center. And the ideal situation would have been for Hunter Rayburn to be ready to take over that spot at center, but that's not the case. So Clemson's been having to let Bockhorst take snaps at center, and he, along with Mason Trotter, have been battling for that job throughout camp. That battle's gonna stretch on probably up into the game. But that's probably my biggest concern, the interior of that offensive line with Bockhorst, whoever plays center, and then Putnam, over on the right side at guard. I thought the interior of that offensive line just did not live up to expectations last year. They took their lumps. Hopefully they learned from it. And those guys have really – they came into the spring and they came into the fall, carried it over into the fall. They had a chip on their shoulder. They heard all that talk. They talked about it multiple times in the spring. They heard it, and they want to prove that it was more – last year was more of an anomaly. But like he was just saying about Georgia, their offensive line going against that defensive line every day in practice, iron sharpens iron. There's no better way to practice for a matchup like this than going up against a defensive line, with that kind of talent. And that's what this offensive line at Clemson's doing too. It doesn't matter which one's the best defensive line. They're both one of the top defensive lines in the country. So those offensive lines, they're matching up against elite level guys each and every day, and that's only going to make them better. My second concern would be the secondary. So I'm echoing what he said about Georgia. I got the same concerns about Clemson. Last time we saw Clemson, that secondary was just did not look good. I think Clemson was real beat up on the back end of the defense last year, and it really affected the way they played. I think not having to year in the weight room hurt some of those younger guys too. I thought some of those safeties looked undersized, and I think I've seen those guys in fall camp. They don't look like that this year. They just look different. They look like they've been in the weight room and putting in the work. And like guys like Landon Zanders and Joseph Charleston and R.J. Mickens, they just look better from a physical perspective. Now we have to see if that translates into their play on the field, because that safety core's got to be better than it was last year. Like Bobby was saying earlier, I'm not concerned about the corners. To me, it's more about the safeties. I think there's some questions to answer there. I think they got, the talent, but they got to prove it on the field. And I've really not seen that yet, not in a big game, not from this group that's currently on the roster now.
Now, Jason and Mark, let me ask y'all this. How do you think this game is going to play out in terms of, you've got the questions on the offensive line, guys that are being replaced, going up against an elite level defensive line both ways. So you feel like the front seven is probably going to control this game, stop the run, get after the quarterback. But then you've also got the questions in the secondary with some answers at wide receiver for both teams. Do you think this is one that's going to be high scoring, where teams are, both the teams are airing it out and putting up big points that way? Or do you think this could be a, slug it out kind of battle with the defensive line, front seven really dominating? Because I go back and forth. I think that there's a chance this could be a really low scoring game, and that those defensive lines and front sevens are dominating against the offensive lines, and that it's really hard to run the ball. I don't think either team's going to be able to run the ball all that well. And that, they're just making in a nightmare for the quarterbacks? Or do you think that those offensive lines are going to be able to hold their own slightly, just enough to get those wide receivers and passing threats open downfield where, Georgia and Clemson are going to put up big points on the scoreboard?
Yeah, I'm like you. I kind of go back and forth. I can't really decide. If I had to pick right now, I lean more towards more of a lower scoring game. Like you said, the front sevens kind of dominate. Maybe might come down to which team's receivers can make one or two more plays out on the perimeter in space. Make a guy in the secondary miss, break off a long run and score or whatever. And it could come down to special teams too. Special teams in these low scoring games, if this is what this game is, special teams always seems to play a factor. And it could very well come down to a special teams play that decides this game. But if I had to sit here right now and make a prediction, I definitely lean more towards a lower scoring affair. I'm not saying 13-10 or anything like that, maybe both teams into 20s. But that's what I would say right here today, just because of how good the front sevens are on each side of the ball. I think both of those front sevens are going to wreak havoc in this game.
I can see us going to halftime in like a 17-14 game that was mostly defensive dominated, but because the rush isn't going to get there every play, and there is potential to break free and make big plays in the passing game, that there's going to be 3 to 5 big plays that are going to be near scoring plays, either scoring plays or 45-yard, 50-yard plays that are going to, put somebody in scoring position, and you're going to see a bunch of 3 and outs, but when you see a play, you're going to see a play.
I kind of agree with you there. I don't necessarily see any long sustained drives.
Yep.
Where a team's going 3 yards in a cloud of dust against one of these front sevens. But I'm with you. I think that both these teams have the weapons on offense that they could and match up very well against the defense that they're going up against, that they could hit on some big plays, and that's going to be kind of the deciding factor in this one.
Very well. That would not surprise me one bit either, especially what I was just talking about with Clemson secondary and those safeties, tend to get caught peeking in that backfield sometimes, especially the way Georgia likes to run the ball. I could easily see Georgia hitting 2 or 3 big plays over the top of this defense, and that could be the difference in the game.